Rabotai, welcome back to Dalad Amot Shel Halacha and Kadosh Baruch Hu Be'olam Ela Arba Amot Shel Halacha Bilvad. We are continuing in Siman Reis Tzadik Tet in Halacha Gimel. This will be part 4 of the Shi'ur. Let's just jump into the Biur Halacha and Dibra Matchil and Tzarich Levarech V'chulum. With that, you will see the review is going to come of what we did in the previous class. So, the Shulchan Aruch had stated that if a person interrupts for Havdalah, he does not need to bless the blessing of Borei Per Geffen on the course Shel Havdalah. And we explained in the Mishnah Berurah Siv Katan Tet that even if a person was established on a drink alone, he was not in the middle of the bread meal, and now he decided to do Havdalah, he doesn't have to say the blessing of Borei Per Geffen on the course Shel Havdalah. And how much more so if he was in the middle of a bread meal where he doesn't have to stop. The halacha is going to tell you, and he decides to go ahead and do Havdalah. The halacha says you don't have to say the blessing of Borei Per Geffen on the course Shel Havdalah. Today we want to see halachically, Rabotai, in Dibra Matchil Ein Tzarich Levarech V'chulu, in the Biur Halacha, that is, what about the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman when I'm in the middle of a bread meal? Because you have to remember, if I'm right now eating Sudah Shalishit, and I started before sunset, and now it's already way past after nightfall, Shabbat completely came out, and let's say I wanted to watch a shi'ur while I'm having my Sudah Shalishit, not to waste time. I said to the family, no, let's do Havdalah now. We did Havdalah. So halacha says, the blessing of Borei Per Geffen, you're not going to say, like we explained, Rabotai, why? Because again, and the Mishnah Berurah Siv Katan Tet explained, because that's specifically where you had wine in the bread meal, because when you bless the blessing of Borei Per Geffen on the wine in the bread meal, that covers for the wine for the Kosher Havdalah. And that's what we spoke about already. So it comes out over here, Rabotai, that if right now I went ahead and I did Havdalah, and I said Borei Mer Ha'esh, and Borei Mini B'Samim, and Baruch HaMavdil, and so on and so forth, after I finished the Havdalah service, I want to continue eating my Sudah Shalishit with a shi'ur in front of me. Do I go back and say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz? Yes or no? I'm very happy that the Shulchan Aruch showed us the halakha that when it comes to the blessing of Borei Per Geffen, you don't have to say in the kosher Havdalah like we've been speaking in the first 3 parts of the shi'ur. But what about the blessing of Hamotzi? What about if I'm in a bread meal and I did Havdalah, and now I want to go ahead and bless Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz? Or I don't have to bless Amot Shel Halacha Siman. What am I supposed to do? Because you have to remember, when I began Sudah Shalishit, it was Shabbat. After Havdalah, it's a regular weekday. So maybe these 2 meals are not connected. Or maybe no, we're going to tell you they are connected. So let's see the Biur Halacha for that. Comes to Biur Halacha and he says, V'gam birkat hamotzi ein tzarich levarech l'kula alma. And also the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman, you don't need to bless according to everyone. When you go to complete your meal after Havdalah, we're not going to require you to say the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Why is that? Since halachically speaking, you did not need to interrupt your meal. You did not need to interrupt in the middle of your meal to do Havdalah. Meaning, if you guys remember, in Siman Reis Tzadik Tet in Halacha Aleph, we spoke about over there at the length, if a person began eating before sunset, and then the 3 stars came out, does he continue eating, or does he have to stop and do Havdalah? So we saw, according to the Stam opinion, we saw he clearly says that if a person was eating before sunset, and the stars came out, You don't have to stop. You're allowed to continue even until midnight. Not a problem. But according to the Yesh Omrim, they said no, absolutely not. Once it's Vadai Chashicha, once we know 100% sure that when the stars came out, the Yesh Omrim, you have to stop. You have to put them up like a challah cover, and then you have to go ahead and do Havdalah. And only then you're allowed to continue back and eating your meal. That was according to the Yesh Omrim. They say that the night separates you from the bread meal, meaning you can no longer eat it until you do Havdalah. Beautiful. Halacha is like Stam, like we've been seeing up to now this whole time. The halacha is like Stam. Remember, Stam v'yesh, halacha kistam. Now, comes the Biur Halacha and he tells you, since halachically we hold like the Stam and Siman Reish Tzaddik, like in Halacha Aleph, that I'm not obligated to stop when the stars come out, therefore the Havdalah that I decided to do on my own initiative, that's not excuse me, that's not going to require me to go ahead and say another bracha. If you're going to go like the Yesh Omrim, over there you're going to have a big problem, because if I have to stop and I have to go back, you're right, maybe because I have to stop, that's going to be the cutoff point. Maybe according to him, when I have to go back and bless, I won't have to say Amot Shel Halacha Siman. But we don't hold like the Yesh Omrim. We hold like the Stam. So therefore the Stam says that the stars, when they come out, meaning once it's nightfall, it doesn't obligate you to do Havdalah. If it doesn't obligate me to do Havdalah, and I decided to do Havdalah on my initiative, that Havdalah is not going to separate me from my Amot Shel Halacha Siman blessing. Excuse me. That's why you're allowed to go ahead and continue eating your Sudah Shalishit without first having to say the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. So one more time. וגם ברכת המות שאין צריך לברך לכולו עמו כשחוזר לגמור סעודה אחר הבדלה, אחר דמדיל לא היה צריך להפסיק באמצע הסעודה להבדיל. And also the blessing of Birkat HaMotzi, you don't need to stop according to everybody. When you go back and complete the meal after the Havdalah, the reason being is because halachically you did not need to stop in the middle of your meal to do Havdalah. So you decided to do Havdalah, beseder, but the law didn't require you. If the law doesn't require you, therefore you do not lose the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. He says, Ken muchach le'el b'siman reish ayin aleph seif dalet ayin sham. He says, so too is brought down in Siman 271 in Halacha Dalet. Look over there. Rabotai, let's look over there, very important. Let me tell you outside before we start over here. You have to remember, the language that the Biur Halacha uses, he uses a language of Ken muchach. So too is proven. That if you look into the Halacha and Siman reish ayin aleph in Halacha Dalet, you're going to see those words. Not you're going to see those words. You're going to have to imply from the Shulchan Aruch's words that in the case over here, you don't have to say how much Lachim Aretz. And I'll explain to you the Machloket. Like we spoke about it before, when it comes to Kiddush, Kiddush has a stringency that Havdalah doesn't have. Havdalah has a leniency that Kiddush doesn't have. And what's that? By Kiddush, once it's nightfall, once it's sunset, where it's Savach HaSheicha, since we don't know if it's really night or day, we go L'chumra, so that's when we say sunset, that's what means Chashecha, really means nightfall, because we have a doubt. But once it's sunset by Kiddush, that sunset, it forbids you to continue eating. By Havdalah, meaning by Motzi Shabbat, when you start before sunset, and now sunset comes in, that sunset does not cut you off. You're allowed to continue eating no matter what. Like we saw in Halacha Aleph, in Siman Reish Tzaddik Tet. So the Biur Halacha is going to make this deal, he's going to make this implication. He's going to make this inference. That if over here by Kiddush, halachically I'm obligated to stop. So therefore if I'm obligated to stop, therefore I have to go ahead and say that new blessing on Amot Shel Halacha Siman must be in a case where I don't have to stop halachically, I don't have to say the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Alright, let's see this over here in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph in Halacha Dalet. It says like this. Asur letom klum kodem shikadesh. It's forbidden for a person to taste anything before he does Kiddush. Afilu ma'im, even water. Even if a person began his bread meal before sunset during the day, he needs to stop eating once sunset hits. Shepores mapa umekadesh. You have to go ahead and put the challah cover on the bread, and then you have to go ahead and do the Kiddush. And let's say you were drinking yain, meaning wine, in the bread meal from the onset before the kiddush. All you're going to say is the kiddush alone without the blessing of the wine. Because since you already had wine before sunset, that wine the blessing that you said on this wine is going to transfer over on the kosher kiddush. Nevertheless, this is what we want to see. But nevertheless, he says, "Ve'achar kach mivarech birkat hamotzi." Nevertheless, he says, and afterwards, after you did the kiddush ceremony, you're going to head and you're going to bless the blessing of hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Rabotai, I don't want to stop you. I don't want to go through the whole thing. I want to do with you Sivkat and Yudzayin. Now, I want to show you something what happened over here. Kiddush obligates me to stop. Since Kiddush obligates me to stop, Kiddush is an interruption. It makes me lose my original blessing that I said on Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Since it obligates me to stop and it obligates me to say Kiddush, because I can't eat unless I do Kiddush. So if I can't eat unless I do Kiddush, I lost the bracha completely. But by the case of Havdalah, by the sun setting, it doesn't stop me. Therefore, when I decide to do Havdalah, that also shouldn't stop me. But one more time, by Kiddush, the sun setting is what actually stops me. You know, so let me read for you, Sivkat and Yudalid. Let me read for you in the Mishnah Berurah. It says like this. Tzarich lafsik. Here, you do have to stop. Even if you began to eat the bread meal during the day, you have to stop. V'avagav the hitchil beheter, even though you began in a permissible way, you have to stop. So now, before he's going to answer the question, let me ask the question. So he's going to say like this. If you're going to compare Kiddush to Havdalah, we know by Havdalah I don't have to stop. When you begin in a permissible way, like we saw in Siman Reish Tzadiket Halacha Aleph. So why we in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph in Halacha Dalet, he's telling me that when I do begin in a permissible way, I do have to stop. Why? How is Kiddush different than Havdalah? So he answered and he says, Shani Hacha. In the case of Kiddush is different. Why? The Kiddush Shaykh L'Su'udah. The Kiddush is part of the meal. What does that mean, Rabotai? Because you have to understand, if you're not doing Kiddush, you can't eat. The night is what forbids you from continue eating. So Kiddush is really going to allow you to eat. By Moti Shabbat, meaning by the Sudah Shlishit over there, when you began before sunset, do I have to say Havdalah to allow me to continue eating? Absolutely not. Do I have to stop eating after nightfall? Absolutely not. So just because I decided to do Havdalah on my own, doesn't matter, but there is no halachic requirement of me to stop. Since there is no halachic requirement of me to stop, therefore when I go back to continue eating my Sudah Shlishit, even though it's no longer Shabbat for me, I don't have to say the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. And he concludes and he says like this. Initially, the Chachamim made you do Kiddush after sunset. That was specific Rabotai. They made you do Kiddush before the meal and in the place of the meal. So Kiddush is what's going to actually allow you to continue eating the meal. So that's why over here, Kiddush can become a hefsek. It's an interruption between the bread that you were eating before sunset to that same bread that you're going to eat after Kiddush, because that Kiddush made an interruption between the Hamotzi before and the Hamotzi now. That you have to go back and you have to re-bless. If you look at Sivkat and Yudzayin where he says, and afterwards you're going to go and you're going to say the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman, and that is, when you're going to come back and you're going to want to complete your original meal that you were eating, you're going to bless the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman again from the beginning. You don't fulfill your obligation with the Amot Shel Halacha Siman that you blessed initially in the beginning of the meal, meaning before sunset. Why? לפי שהקידוש שבינתיים שהיה צריך לאומרו מפני שנאסר באכילה עד שיקדש, זה הווה הפסק. Because the kiddush in the interim that you needed to say because it becomes forbidden on you to eat until you do kiddush is considered to be an interruption. לפיכך, therefore, צריך לברך שנית ברכת המוציא. That's why you have to go back and you have to bless ברכת המוציא לכן הארץ a second time, even on that bread that you initially blessed, Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Ubirkat Hamazon, rak pam achad b'sof hasuda. When it comes to Birkat Hamazon, you're only going to do it one time after the end of your meal, because it's all one meal. So what do we see over here, Rabotai, in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph and Halacha Daled? When do I have to go back and say the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman? When halachically sunset forbids me to continue eating. Since sunset forbids me to continue eating, I have to do Kiddush. Oh, so since Kiddush is what's going to allow me to continue eating, therefore I have to say no Hamotzi. But by the case of Havdalah, that's not the case. By the case of Havdalah, sunset does not forbid me eating. And Havdalah that I decide to do later on also doesn't forbid me, because halachically I was allowed to continue eating. I just decided to do Havdalah early. So that's why Rabotai, the Biur Halacha says in Siman Reish Tzadik Tet, it's proven from the words in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph and Halacha Daled that this is the way you have to learn this halakha. That when it comes to the blessing of the bread of Amot Shel Halacha Siman, you're not going to say it during Sudah Shalishit. The reason being, one more time, because sunset does not hold you back. It does not forbid you from eating or continue eating even after nightfall. You're allowed to go until midnight, not a problem. If you will look like the Yesh Omri want to say that sunset does answer you, then you're right, then you would hold like over there. But we're going like the Stam opinion that says, Ein tzarich lavsik. If I don't have to stop, there's no halacha that requires me to stop, so I don't have to do Havdalah to allow me to eat. Even though you're right, I'm doing the Havdalah now, it doesn't mean anything. Halachically, Havdalah is not going to allow me to continue eating, because Rabotai, halachically, I did not have to stop in the middle of my meal. Continues the Biur Halacha and he says, U'ma shekatav Magen Avraham b'sof Sivkat and Vav, and what the Magen Avraham wrote towards the end in Sivkat and Vav, Diyesh machloket im mevarech achar kach hamotzi, that there is a machloket regarding blessing the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman after Havdalah, hu tamua me'od. Said it's very shocking how he could say such a thing. How can the Magen Avraham say that? It's a machloket. Ukvar tamahu alav achronim b'zeh. Already a lot of later generation rabbis, they were shocked, they were amazed on how can the Magen Avraham said that there is a machloket in the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Rabotai, we're going to conclude with this. B'linad, we're going to start seeing the V'yesh Omrim tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem, B'linad, in the following class. But we have to understand like this. Halachically speaking, let's go over the halakha. Halachically speaking, if a person is in the middle of the su'udah and he began before sunset, even if right now the stars came out and he went ahead and he decided to do Havdalah for whatever reason, now when he wants to go back to eat his meal, the bread meal, he doesn't have to say Amot Shel Halacha Siman. The Magen Avraham said it's a machlok. Some rabbis are going to tell you do have to say Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Some rabbis are going to tell you don't have to say Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Comes the Biur Halacha and he says it's very shocking, or it's astonishing. How can he say those words? And a lot of achronim were already surprised by the language of the Magen Avraham. But we did see, how do we learn this out? Where's the proof that I don't have to say Amot Shel Halacha Siman? Like the Biur Halacha said, Ken muchach le'el b'Siman Reish Ayin Aleph Halacha Daled. If you look into Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, which is 271 in Halacha number 4, over there, from those words over there, it's clearly proven, like we want to say that you don't have to bless. Why? Because over there we explain that if a person was having a meal before sunset and sunset came in, it's forbidden for him to eat. Halachically, he's not allowed to eat. What's going to allow him to continue eating? The Kiddush. Since the Kiddush is what allows him to eat, that separates him from Amot Shel Halacha Siman. Halachically, he cannot eat. Kiddush allows him to eat. Therefore, he loses the bracha of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. We learn that from there, that specifically where the halacha asks me from eating more, then I'm going to tell you have to go back and bless the blessing of Amot Shel Halacha Siman. But in our case, in Siman Reish Tzadik Tet, in Halacha Gimel, where the halacha doesn't ask me from eating, he said you could eat as long as you began in a permissible manner. If it doesn't answer me, so I'm not going to tell you that Havdalah, by me doing Havdalah, is separating me. Absolutely not. We're not going to go like the Magen Avraham. The halacha is like the Biur Halacha, that if a person is in the middle of Sudah Shalishit and he needed to do Havdalah for whatever reason, and now he wants to continue eating his bread meal, he does not have to say the bracha of Amot Shel Lechem Min Haaretz. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.